Now the outsiders have come. You're not afraid of the bear. Did you not respect the land?
On deadly ground.
You have to go along with the illusion, Elliot. Or else it doesn't work. Now bathe me.
Exit to Eden. What do these films have in common? Well, you can probably guess. They're among the lousiest movies of the year. And on this special edition of Siskel and Ebert, Gene and I will be revisiting some of the low points of our year in the dark, the worst films of 1994. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune, and we really love doing this show, got to admit it, because in each and every case, each one of these films took 2 hours out of our lives, 2 hours we'll never get back.
We should call this show The Critic's Revenge.
Good idea. Our first category of lousy films is bad Western movies, or as I like to call it, wagons horrible. Both of my choices are would-be comic westerns, triggered obviously by the surprise success a couple of years ago of City Slickers. The sequel, City Slickers 2, stunk out the joint because basically it was just a remake of the original with Billy Crystal as the urban nerd out west searching for gold, but finding instead the long-lost brother of his mentor Curly, played by Jack Palance.
Half of what's up there is more than I'll ever need. Half? You mean you get a half and the three of us have to split a half? Which is fine. I'll go along with that. Just remember something. Don't mess with us, pal. We're from New York.
Even worse was a dreary comedy called Wagons East, which was noteworthy only because John Candy died during its filming. Richard Lewis took the Billy Crystal role of the wise guy New Yorker out of his element, but no one gave him or Candy anything funny to do.
Which way are we...
Yeah. I guess the answer with both of these films is that if you pitch your script as, hey, it could be the next City Slickers, you probably haven't been trying all that hard to come up with fresh entertainment.
Yeah, nobody's going to be saying, hey, this could be the next City Slickers 2. Okay, your westerns were intended as mass-market comedies. I have a couple of bad westerns, too, and my choices suffer from serious overdoses of symbolism and pretension. If there's anything worse than a bad comic western, it's probably a bad serious western. The first one is Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, and this has to rank as one of the most confused and meandering films of recent years, even though it was directed by the talented Gus Van Sant, who made Drugstore Cowboy. The movie stars Uma Thurman as Sissy Hankshaw, a feminine hygiene products model with great big thumbs, which she uses to hitchhike to a ranch out west, which is run entirely by women and headed up by Angie Dickinson. This is the kind of film that recycles statements from the blissed-out 60s and still thinks they're, quote, cool, unquote.
Trick riding is what cowgirls have almost always done in rodeo. Our society sure likes to see its unconventional women do tricks. That's what prostitutes call it. You know, tricking.
Moving right along, my next western that qualifies as one of the year's worst is Silent Tongue, written and directed by the playwright Sam Shepard, apparently without providing the actors with a clue as to what it was about. They are absolutely at sea here. The movie opens with River Phoenix sitting for weeks under the open sky next to the corpse of his half-Indian wife.
I will stay until your hair has blown away. No bone will stay. No bone.
His father, played by Richard Harris, fears he may die of a broken heart, so he visits a medicine show huckster, played by Alan Bates. The boy's first wife was Bates' daughter, and now maybe his grief can be healed if he marries her sister. Are you following this?
I see.
Silent Tongue is just plain goofy. It is an impossible story performed by thoroughly confused actors and directed by Shepard as if the thought of cutting one single line of dialogue would be sacrilege. I have seen whole movies that seem shorter than the last half hour of this one. The Western form lends itself to ponderous half-baked symbolism, and Silent Tongue goes right off the deep end.
That was a shocking film to sit through. And you know, Roger, you know how sometimes it happens rarely, but once in a while a projectionist will get the reels mixed up. Repeatedly through this film, I thought that was happening. And in fact, I'll put it the other way. If it had happened, it wouldn't have made any difference at all. Coming up next, a big couple of productions with Save the Planet themes, one produced by a big star, the other featuring a big star. The year's worst continues.
I didn't want to resort to violence.
The year's worst movies. In this segment, we want to concentrate on movies about heroic characters who are determined to save their civilizations. Our advice, before you save the planet, save the movie. My first choice is On Deadly Ground, a lugubrious drama set in Alaska, where Steven Seagal blows up an entire oil refinery when what he should have been doing is setting fire to his dialogue. The movie involves an impenetrable plot in which the evil Michael Caine wants to start up a refinery that Seagal knows will self-destruct, causing a big oil leak. To prevent this leak, Seagal blows up the refinery. That won't cause a leak, he explains, because he has, quote, reversed the valves, unquote. You bet he has.
I mean, do you really think that this hocus-pocus spirit stuff is going to help us now? What do you think? Some angel is going to miraculously come down out of the sky and stop, say, 350 billion tons of oil from being spilled into our oceans every year? Maybe some ghost will stop all the cars from using gasoline. Maybe somehow some spirit will trip the big switch and all the technology that's been repressed for the last 70 years will suddenly be ours and it'll be a better place to live, a beautiful place.
On Deadly Ground closes with an endless speech by Seagal to the Alaska State Legislature, in which, in a rather unlikely development, considers him a hero for having blown up this oil refinery. The speech is one of the major egotistical vanity scenes in recent movies, and in it, Seagal solemnly informs us that the oil industry has suppressed carburetors that would deliver 100 miles to the gallon. I'm not sure, but I think he really believes this, and he also believes that Alaska lawmakers would be glad to put their state's #1 industry right out of business. That's why they gave him the medal.
That speech comes way out of left field. It's like out of a bad Billy Jack movie. It's ridiculous. Okay, my Forget Saving the Planet, Save Your Movie selection is the Kevin Costner produced Rapa Nui, and I think I'll just tell you the plot of this, Bob, so you can have a laugh and be glad you missed it. Rapa Nui is a drama set among the massive stone statues of mysterious Easter Island, and the premise here is that the statues were built by a tribal leader who wanted the gods to visit the island. So far, so good, but the centerpiece of the film is a ridiculous race among young braves of the island to capture a bird's egg, strap it to their foreheads, and bring it back unbroken to home base. I don't know about you, but I don't go to the movies to see games that I wouldn't play at my kid's birthday party. And the Save the Planet element of Rapa Nui is that the trees are being cut down to help transport the giant stone statues across the island. It could be true, but it's not dramatic. Executive producer Kevin Costner meant well with this mess, I'm sure, but that only makes Rapa Nui a well-meaning mess. When they're running around, weren't the actors embarrassed?
Unbelievable, although you have to admit, Gene, that the movie scores very high on the National Geographic scale with the fact that all of the maidens are topless,
yes.
And there are a lot of maidens, and they're always put right up in the front row by the ecologically interested filmmakers. Yes. When we come back, a unique new genre, comedies without laughs. How do they play? Kind of like dramas without brains.
Movies of 1994. The next category is comedies without laughs. And is there anything more deadly than sitting through a comedy for the first reel in which not one single joke makes anyone in the audience laugh? We had this experience a few times in '94. Chevy Chase, no stranger to this annual Worst of Show, starred in such a picture, Cops and Robertsons. Isn't that a funny title, Rod? Yeah, playing an innocent yokel whose house is seized by Detective Jack Palance so that he can spy on the criminal neighbor next door. The comic tone here is like some dreary studio comedy from the 50s made for the bottom half of a matinee double bill.
You talking to me? You talking to me? You talk me? You? Me?
Norman?
I have no idea why anyone thought this script was worth making, and that also holds true for Clifford, a truly detestable film about a truly detestable little boy played by Martin Short. The whole gimmick? Short is an adult playing a kid. Martin Short is a brilliant impersonator, but he comes across here as a mean little dweeb as he warms up to his new guardian played by Charles Grodin, and Grodin's fiancée played by Mary Steenburgen. What are these two talents doing in this mess of a picture?
Say hello to my boss, Mr. Hall.
Isn't he a cute little fella?
Hi, Sonny. Good morning, Mr. Allen. My, that's the bestest looking wig I've ever seen.
Oh, no, that's not a wig.
You said it was a wig?
No. I think the producers of Clifford must have run test shots on Short before filming began. They had to do that, of course. And that should have told them all they needed to know to scrap this project or at least rethink it, but that never happened. When you get money in Hollywood to make a picture, you just go forward as fast as you can. What I'm saying is that he looks unappealing, and he's a turn-off, and you don't want to watch the movie.
At a film festival, I ran into a cinematographer whose name will be unmentioned, who turned down this movie after looking at the screen test and telling the producers, you can't be serious about this, and they said, oh, yes, we are.
I mean,
unbelievable.
They get the money, they'll shoot it.
They couldn't look at it and see that it didn't work. Okay, I also suffered through a couple of terrible comedies last year, and one of them was certainly Milk Money, an incredible film about a kid who takes his pocket money, rides his bike into the city, finds a hooker, and convinces her to come home with him and live in the treehouse, telling his dad she's a math tutor. Hello.
Dad.
That's Melanie Griffith as the hooker there, Ed Harris as the dad, and Michael Patrick Carter as the kid, with the thankless task of trying to hold a screenplay together.
What are you doing? I'm taking a bath. Why? Well, because my boss had his heart ripped out and some very bad people are looking for me, so I'm staying for a while. I've seen the Brady Bunch. Nothing bad ever happens to you people.
Another awful comedy this year was Exit to Eden, directed by Gary Marshall, usually a dependable filmmaker, but not this time, as he steers us to an island paradise that is headquarters for a kinky sex resort. The club is run by Dana Delaney, probably the least convincing dominatrix in movie history, and the plot somehow contrives to bring a couple of cops to the island to investigate a crime. They're played by Rosie O'Donnell and Dan Aykroyd.
You gonna tell us where your partner is?
I don't know what you're talking about. Honest, I'm just a guest here. Right. Listen to me.
Oh!
Don't fight him. Let me go. I just made a mistake. You're under arrest.
Sheila, read her rights. Make sure she understands.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used.
What's amazing is that they had a story about whips and chains and peanut butter on a tropical island, and they thought they had to spice it up with a tired run-through of old cop buddy cliches. Another weird thing about Exit to Eden is that even though the whole vacation club is allegedly devoted to sex, nobody really seemed to take the sex seriously, treating it more like a funny dress-up game at a birthday party. The sex would have been sexier in this movie if they'd had eggs strapped to their foreheads.
You know, it really, also on the costuming level, I realize that some of this S&M leatherware, it can't be made to look attractive. But just the whole costuming of this picture seems so cheap,
well,
so
a lot
old.
of them seem to be dressed for outtakes for Quo Vadis and those Greco-Roman
I thought somebody really was way off here at every level, even in decorating a picture where most of the people are going to be naked. Coming up next, our worst film of the year. 5 doses of Robin Williams, and it doesn't necessarily mean 5 times the fun.
Worst films. Our next category is devoted to stars who play multiple roles in the same movie and are unconvincing in all of them. And my choice would be the strange epic Being Human, starring Robin Williams as a kind of everyman who is glimpsed in various identities across the centuries. For example, here he is with John Turturro in the days of the Roman Empire.
I don't understand. What do you want me to do? I don't think I could help you die.
We'll help each other. We must. We've been through this whole mess together. You don't understand, do you? I'm asking you to die with me. You're my closest, my dearest slave.
And here he is in modern times taking his kids to the beach.
Everything's going to be okay.
What do you mean going to be? This is it.
What?
I told you, Dad. This is as good as it gets. This might be the best moment of your life.
I think maybe the theme of Being Human was that at all times and in all places, men dream the same dreams and have the same ambitions and fears. And that's a wonderful lesson. But the movie was unable to link it to the slightest bit of dramatic interest or tension. Most of the scenes seem to consist of characters standing around making whimsical small talk. And Robin Williams, who specializes in playing lots of different kinds of characters, seems equally desperate here as all of them.
Yes, we get the point. He's a tormented soul, and he's always been a tormented soul, and men have always been a tormented soul, and that's not my idea of entertainment.
And now we're the tormented soul.
Yeah, I really like this category, though, and I have a candidate, the great Sissy Spacek, who was just awful in multiple roles. You'll remember this one, Trading Mom, about some little kids who want to swap their mom for someone not so strict. So they go to a bazaar where they audition other moms. Goofy characters, all played by Sissy Spacek. Here she is as an outdoor mom.
We are going camping today.
Here she is as a French fashion mom.
Wow, we get to ride, miss.
Surely, you did not expect us to take the bus.
here she is as a clown mom.
Oh, I'd like to join circus. What if they don't want to be in the circus? What about the duh?
Doesn't Trading Mom look really cheap? I know Spacek has young children of her own, and I'm sure she made this with them in mind, something of a bedtime film, if you will. But I think she would have done a lot better just reading the kids a bedtime story than foisting this junk on them and us.
You know, when stars play different characters in a movie, these days they always try to make the characters look really different. And yet when that gimmick worked, when Alec Guinness and Peter Sellers did it 30 years ago, the joke was that all the characters basically looked the same and nobody really noticed it.
You're also talking about two of the greatest talents in motion picture history.
When we come back, Gene and I reveal our choices for the absolutely worst single film.
The worst movie of 1994, the movie that Roger and I each would least like to sit through a second time, the single worst picture of 94. And I thought about Mixed Nuts, which just came out at Christmas time, but my choice is another cataclysmically unfunny comedy. It's called North, directed by Rob Reiner, of all people, written by Hans Bell, about a boy named North, played by Elijah Wood, who wants to divorce his parents, and so this is sort of trading mom and dad. And the parents he interviews as possible replacements are just one dreadful, unfunny stereotype after another in a film that often looks like outtakes from old travel logs. Here are the Hawaiian parents North meets.
Hawaii is a lush and fertile land. In fact, there's only one barren area on all of our islands. Unfortunately, it's Mrs. Holt.
And here are the Eskimo parents he interviews.
Here you go, North. Nice cup of hot cocoa. And to go with that, our state dish, Eskimo pie.
That's supposed to be humor in the 1990s. North also manages to be quite offensive in a single shot and a joke about a praying Hasidic Jew testing pants, a totally thoughtless, tasteless scene. I know what went wrong with this movie. Everything. It's shabby and it's mean.
Well, Gene, I had to think a long time to pick my worst picture of 1994, about a tenth of a second. And believe it or not, it's the same one that you chose.
Oh, well, this was it's a stunning
We kept this a secret from each other, and unfortunately, I think I like it even less than you do, if that's possible. My choice is also North. All of the many different kinds of parents young North auditions have one thing in common. They appear in scenes of startling stupidity and offensive caricature. And one scene in particular that hits a new low in bad taste is this one, where the Eskimo would-be parents and their aged father, played by Abe Vigoda, off to die along with other members of the community who have outlived their usefulness. What a heartwarming message for kids.
He's had a great life, and he's happy to set sail before he starts embarrassing himself.
Yeah, take it from us, North. When drool hardens, it's not a pretty sight.
But, come on, let's go, pal. This is no surprise to you, is it? You know where you're going. Take a walk. Come on, let's go. Move it along. Let's go. Yeah, bye. Fine, thank you.
Bye, Dad.
Bye, Dad.
Bye.
When it came time to write my newspaper review of this movie, I don't know, something just came over me. My fingers on the keyboard had little minds of their own. I was rolling along, writing my usual scathing but civilized comments when suddenly a sinister inner force took over and I found myself typing, and I quote, "I hated this movie. Hated this movie. Hated it. Hated every simpering, stupid, vacant, audience-insulting moment of it," unquote, and so on. Altogether, I used the word hated 10 times. I have to give North credit for one thing, though. When I was preparing for this show, I didn't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out which was the year's worst movie, so it saved me time.
You know, I talked to the writer of this picture. I was so thunderstruck by Alan Zweibel, and I think that maybe these guys and Rob Reiner are using a sort of an old-style comedy that really has just gone out of fashion. It was funny sometimes when Mel Brooks took some of these caricatures in the early 70s, but he did it with a kind of liveliness here. This stuff just clangs and clangs.
Maybe do it more broadly or with more burlesque, but here, I mean, the idea of a kid shopping for new parents is not intrinsically funny, and so unless you really know how to handle it, you're really shopping for disaster.
It didn't work with Trading Mom, and it didn't work for North. That's it for this special show. Now, don't you feel better just having done it? Next week, we'll be back with some reminders for the members of the Motion Picture Academy. They're about to receive their Oscar nominating ballots, and Roger and I want to suggest some great performances in films that shouldn't be overlooked. Siskel and Ebert's Memo to the Academy is next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Use Lysol Drain Opener.